This is a quick tour of how to enable host authentication on D3 Windows. Please take a second to read the disclaimer and my bio. Before we get started, let's talk about what host authentication is, how it differs from normal D3 authentication, and some miscellaneous stuff you should bear in mind. Since D3 is now authenticating using Windows users and passwords, the passwords in your D3 users file are ignored, but the D3 users logon macro is executed if present. For example, you might have a D3 and a Windows user named Bill. When you log on as Bill, it will use the Windows password, not the D3 password, but it will still do whatever you told the Bill user to do when they log on, like setting up a print queue, a term type, or log to an account. The D3 VME service should run as a domain user, not a local system account. That way D3 will authenticate against the domain users instead of your needing to set up a bunch of local Windows users and passwords and maintain that set of passwords, which kind of defeats the purpose. There are two modes of D3 Windows host authentication: Telnet Force Check on and off. When running with Telnet Force Check off, D3 will authenticate the user and go straight to the logon macro if present, and not ask for a user ID or password. When running with Telnet Force Check on, the standard D3 login prompt is presented and the user is asked for a Windows user and password before gaining access to D3. Telnet Force Check on is the more secure and generally preferred method. Encryption libraries must be loaded and available to D3 in order for Phantoms to run with passwords, as they are stored encrypted in the jobs file. Passwords stored in the programs and files are stored as clear text, as they always were, except they are now domain passwords, and care should be taken to make sure they are not exposed. To configure D3 Windows host authentication, you shut down D3, launch the D3 Device Manager, go to the D3 Settings tab and click the Windows Logon radio button. If you want D3 to challenge for a user and password, which you do, also click the Telnet Forced Host Authentication checkbox. If you're using MVSP, like for the MVS Toolkit or the APIs, you'll need to set up a Windows user called MVSP either on the local system or the domain as which D3 VME is running. Use any password you like and remember to sync it with the mvsp.password utility in the MVSP account. Then start the VME service and D3 will be running, now expecting Windows users and passwords, not D3 users and passwords. So let's see what the D3 logon now looks like. This first example shows how it behaves without the Telnet Force Host Authentication checkbox checked. It bypasses the enter your user ID and prompt and goes straight to the master dictionary prompt. This next example shows how it behaves with the Telnet Forced Host Authentication checkbox checked. It now presents the enter your user ID prompt. Once you give it a Windows user, it asks for a password. Once you give it a Windows password, it goes out and checks with Windows for the user and password validity. After that, you are asked for the master dictionary. This final example shows how it behaves with the Telnet Forced Host Authentication checkbox checked and a logon macro in the D3 users file. Once you give it a user and password, the logon macro does the rest. I've shown a sample users item with a logon macro on the left and the results on the right. Thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or problems, please contact Rocket D3 Support.